So our story kicks off in the mid-19th century, so around 1850s, and we're in France. Now, at the time, there were cholera outbreaks, poor sanitation, and there was a scientific revolution underway. And enter a man named Louis Pasteur. He is the grandfather of germ theory. So born in 1822, it says, his title, so to speak. So Pasteur was a chemist and biologist who proved that microorganisms caused fermentation and spoilage. He developed pasteurization, so heating liquids like milk to kill bacteria, and pioneered vaccines for rabies and anthrax. Now, his big idea: diseases are caused by specific germs invading the body from outside. This was revolutionary. No more blaming of the bad air or humours. Now it was possible to target the culprits. Now, just to spend a moment here, so bad air, this is something called miasma theory. And so before germ theory, many people believed diseases were caused by miasma, so foul or polluted air emanating from rotting matter, swamps, or unsanitary conditions. The idea, dating back to as old as ancient Greece, persisted all the way through till the 1800s, held that inhaling these noxious vapors caused illness like cholera or the plague. Humours, again rooted in ancient Greek medicine, so this is Hippocrates and Galen. The humoral theory claimed health depended on balancing four bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Imbalances caused by diet, environment, or emotions were thought to trigger disease. I mention that because obviously setting the scene as to like what was common at the time or what was thought of as like perceived wisdom, it changes through history, right? Try and put yourself back in those shoes. So humours, imbalances caused by diet, environment, or emotions were thought to trigger disease. But, and this is where this starts to get a bit spicy, Pasteur was not the only person alone in the lab. He had a contemporary and a rival, Antoine Béchamp. So Béchamp was born in 1816, lived to 1908. He was a French chemist and biologist, and he proposed something radically different: terrain theory. Béchamp argued that microbes aren't fixed enemies, they're pleomorphic, meaning they change form based on the environment. He discovered tiny particles he called microzymes, or microzymas, I might be saying that incorrectly, in cells, which could evolve into bacteria or viruses if the body's terrain, i.e. its internal balance of pH, nutrition, and toxicity, wasn't aligned. Now, he discovered this using high-powered microscopes and was examining living tissues, blood, and decomposing matter. Now, in his studies of chalk from geological deposits and living organisms, he observed minute granular particles that appeared to be alive even in ancient fossils. Now, he called these things microzymas, from the Greek small life. These particles, they were distinct from known bacteria, as they seemed to persist across various conditions and transform based on their environment. Béchamp, he wrote a book, The Blood and Its Third Element, in 1869. The quote, microzymas are the organized ferments, the primordial elements of all organized matter. Interesting, right? And just to obviously highlight there, a certain type of microscopic lens just didn't exist before this point, and hence it was possible to actually discover these things. So pleomorphism suggests microbes are dynamic, adapting to the body's condition, and may not always be harmful. That's very different, isn't it? Disease, Béchamp said, starts from within, not from an external attack. So supporting Béchamp was Claude Bernard, born in 1813, died 1878. He was a physiologist who emphasized on the internal milieu, i.e. the body's fluid environment. Bernard's work on homeostasis, aka the body's self-regulation, laid the groundwork for viewing health as balance, not warfare. Now, this timeline, you can feel these characters, they've got very different opinions. It really heats up in the 1860s through to the 1880s. Pasteur and Béchamp, they clashed publicly, having arguments, and Pasteur backed by the French Academy of Sciences, ran experiments showing germs cause disease, like injecting healthy animals with pathogens to make them sick. Béchamp countered with studies on silkworms, claiming diseased terrain allowed microbes to thrive. So they're obviously a bit of a tit for tat, right? So which one is going to win here? Now, politics played a role. Pasteur's ideas aligned with emerging industries, while Béchamp's were harder to monetize. Interesting. This sounds slightly familiar to a recent scenario I found myself in. We will get onto that later. So in 1876, a man named Robert Koch, a German physician, born 1843, died 1910, he entered into the fray on Pasteur's side, and Koch's postulates, 4 criteria to prove a microbe causes a disease, solidified germ theory. So Koch and Pasteur, they jumped into bed together. A big old hoo-ha. So 4 rules to prove a microbe causes disease. This is Koch's postulates. Find it in all sick cases, not healthy ones. Isolate it in a lab. Infect a healthy animal to recreate the disease. Then re-isolate the same microbe. So he did some experiments on anthrax and tuberculosis that absolutely nailed it through this process. So 100% of infected animals got sick, 0 controls did not. And his quote, "The bacillus is the cause." And in this case, Bacillus anthracus is what's being referred to. So it's the anthrax-causing bacterium. It led to vaccines, clean water. They managed to slash cholera deaths by 50%. Koch, he identified bacteria for anthrax, tuberculosis, and cholera. And in 1905, he earned a Nobel Peace Prize, or a Nobel Prize. So by the 1890s, germ theory just absolutely dominated. It cleaned up, basically. And it's unsurprising when you mentioned that incentive earlier as to who they might align with in terms of how to monetize, etc. We'll dig into that a little later. But so here is the big plot twist, though. On his deathbed in 1895, Pasteur reportedly said, "Bernard was right. The microbe is nothing. The terrain is everything." Pasteur is just admitting that. On his deathbed, what are the things you wish you did in your life? It's like, you know what, this guy I've been up against my whole career, he was actually right. And it suggests, of course, that Pasteur saw the bigger picture than just focusing on the germ. Now, is this a genuine admission or just a spicy rumor? I'll never know, right? I can't go and ask either of these dead men what is true. But it spices things up a bit, right? So historians, of course, they still debate this. It fuels terrain theory advocates to this day, in spite of germ theory, and it's still true now. It's true in the late 1800s. Today, germ theory is the hands down winner. I don't honestly know many people that have even talked to me about terrain theory before.